Now that I've finished a bunch of long video series, I've realized that I'm really backed up on content. See, way back when I started this channel, I made a long list of videos I wanted to respond to. A long list. A very long list. Add to that all the videos I've been sent by viewers, and you can see that I've got my work cut out for me. But instead of getting through most of those videos, I've just been finding more and more recent things to talk about and have totally forgotten to get through the backlog. I apologize for that. Therefore, I want to spend some time addressing videos already in my queue. That doesn't mean I won't grab something new and interesting too, but I feel I have to get to some of these, and if you sent something in and I didn't do it, I'm sorry. Hopefully you'll see it sooner rather than later. That said, though, we come to Russell Brand. Russell Brand is a complete idiot. He's been fired for more acting jobs than he's probably ever had, and worse, he's an armchair religious apologist, more specifically a Hindu apologist, and those are pretty few and far between, especially in the Western world. So when he started claiming that British comedian and atheist Stephen Fry had somehow proven the existence of God, I just had to jump in. Eventually. But whatever, let's see what he's got to offer.
Hello, I'm Russell Brand, this is The Truths. Do subscribe here. Now, Stephen Fry has got to be one of the most beloved people in this country, if not the entire world. He's made us think about depression, homosexuality, cleverness in a different way. He's General Melchett from Blackadder, for God's sake. He's one of the most beloved figures in our cultural pantheon, and he's clever as all hell, and here I am about to get into a debate, if not an argument, with him, because Stephen Fry really aggressively doesn't believe in God, and I really do believe in God. He went on a TV show to talk about atheism and God. Let's have a look at it now.
Sorry, pal, but you're not about to have a debate with Stephen Fry, any more than I'm going to have a debate with you. You can't do that sitting on what I assume is your own bed by yourself. Hey, with all the drugs, maybe you can just hallucinate that you're having a debate with Stephen Fry. Maybe you think you're sleeping with Stephen Fry. I don't know. But no, he's just too good for you.
Suppose it's all true, and you walk up to the pearly gates and you are confronted by God. What will Stephen Fry say to him, her, or it?
I will basically, what's known as theodicy, I think. I'll say bone cancer in children? What's that about? How dare you? How dare you create a world in which there is such misery that is not our fault? It's not right. It's utterly evil. Why should I respect a capricious, mean-minded, stupid God who creates a world which is so full of injustice and pain? Because the God who created this universe, if it was created by God, is quite clearly a maniac. Utter maniac. Yes, the world is very splendid, but it also has in it insects whose whole life cycle is to burrow into the eyes of children and make them blind. They eat outwards from the eyes. Why? Why did you do that to us? It's perfectly apparent that he is monstrous, utterly monstrous, and deserves no respect whatsoever. The moment you banish him, your life becomes simpler, purer, cleaner, more worth living, in my opinion.
Now, I just had to leave that and all the other Stephen Fry bits in because they're just so brilliant. The fact is that if God were actually real, well, Lucy, you got some splaining to do. In fact, there are words to that effect carved into a prison cell wall by a Jewish prisoner at the Mauthausen concentration camp. It says, if there is a God, he will have to beg my forgiveness. There's a lot of real evil that God has either done, recorded in the Old Testament, or that has been done in God's name that really paints him as a wretched monster, something that people should not be bowing down to worship. They should be reviling. Anyone who reveres this utter animal because they fear eternal punishment, those people have no spines and are every bit as horrible as the depiction of God himself. But wait a minute. This is the Christian God that we're talking about here, isn't it? I thought Brand was a Hindu. Why does he believe in the Christian God and not Vishnu or Shiva or Shakti? And since he seems to be really enamored with Hare Krishna, why not Krishna? What the hell's going on here?
In a way, what Fry is talking about, in my opinion, is literalism, a literal interpretation of doctrine. In this case, because it's an Irish Catholic interviewer, Gabe Byrne, he's talking about a literal translation of the Gospels. And other than like mentioning some phenomena in nature, like burrowing insects and that, talking entirely about human behaviour and human value systems. Now, Joseph Campbell, the cultural mythologist, said all religions are true in that the metaphor is true. So what Campbell's saying there is that religion is an attempt to explain the unknowable, in the same way that science is an attempt to explain the unknowable. Science can explain the mechanics of the universe and can explain the mechanics of biology and anatomy, but can it ever explain the why? The answer is no, it can never explain why this is happening.
That's because often there is no why. There is no purpose. Things happen because they happen. There is no larger picture. There is no larger purpose or reason. Is Brand arguing that there's a reason that human botflies burrow into some children and not others? Can we determine who is at risk and who is not? Not by looking at someone's location, but on the life they lived or some other criteria. I don't think so, and I don't think any other rational individual does either. It is mere chance that some children within a particular area will get attacked by parasites and others will not. You rarely ever find anyone who's not religious who believes in inherent purpose anyhow, but among the religious, it is a major part of their theology. And of course he goes back to Joseph Campbell, who did indeed say that at the core of all religions, their metaphors are true. But that doesn't mean that he believed that the religious claims were true. In fact, Campbell was quite clear that no religions were factually true as presented. They were just tools for the human psyche, a means to work through the unknown in what is an essentially and emotionally comforting way. Brand uses a lot of wiggle words to try to work his own interpretations into what other people have said, even if it is clear that they didn't mean anything remotely close to Brand's views. This is inherently dishonest, and there's no surprise there.
This is an interesting book called Biocentrism by someone called Robert Lanza. Here he tackles the idea of creation and addresses the flaws, in the same way that Stephen Fry is addressing the flaws in Christian doctrine. Robert Lanza here addresses the flaws in received physics. In the last few decades, there's been considerable discussion of a basic paradox in the construction of the universe as we know it. For example, if the Big Bang had been 1 part in a million more powerful, it would have rushed out too fast for the galaxies and life to develop. If the strong nuclear force were decreased 2%, atomic nuclei wouldn't hold together, and plain vanilla hydrogen would be the only kind of atom in the universe. If the gravitational force were decreased by just a hair, stars, including the sun, would not ignite. These are 3 of more than 200 physical parameters within the solar system and universe, so exact that it strains credulity to propose that they are random, even if that's exactly what standard contemporary physics baldly suggests.
And that's standard religious nonsense. Brand is certainly not alone in falling for it, but then again, that doesn't make it any more intelligent. The fact is, there are a lot of factors that did have to be true in order for life to develop in our universe as it did. If it didn't, we wouldn't be here to argue about it. There may be a near infinite number of universes out there where the physics didn't happen just right, and there's nobody around to notice. Here, it did. But this isn't some amazing coincidence. Like humans were supposed to evolve on this tiny chunk of rock in the middle of nowhere in a vast universe, as creationists often claim must be the case. They are looking at the situation backwards. Humans are a product of our environment. We are not the end goal. We are the way that we are because our home is the way that it is. This is just a dishonest mathematics game, but I can show you just how ridiculous it is. Look at yourself. You are made up of a specific sequence of genes. Humans have about 21,000 individual genes, and if any of yours were out of sequence, you would no longer be you. You'd be someone else. The number of possible combinations for these genes is so large, I couldn't find an online calculator that could provide an answer, although I'm sure someone out there could stick it in the comment below. Therefore, the odds of you being you are almost infinitely rare. Now, if you go back a mere 10 generations and realize that every single ancestor you have out of millions or billions of people on this planet, they had to meet the exact correct matching ancestor at the exact correct time. None of them could have died early or found someone else or gotten sick and become sterile. Each of them had to find each other, and when they had sex, out of the millions and millions of possible sperm and millions of possible eggs, only one single one of each could have come together to form your next ancestor, and so on over just 10 generations. It is almost statistically impossible that you, the exact combination of 21,000 separate genes, could be here right now. But there you are. These statistical games are just bullshit.
I suppose what Christianity and Islam and Judaism and Hinduism and Jainism and Buddhism are trying to do is make sense of our position, our perspective as awake, conscious, sentient beings within the infinite.
And that may very well be the case. They very likely are all trying to make sense of things and coming up with ideas that explain, to them, what may have made sense to their primitive ancestors who, let's be honest, didn't know any better. But Christianity and Islam and Judaism and Hinduism and Jainism and Buddhism, none of these are new ideas. None of these have made use of modern scientific discoveries as a means of trying to make sense of the world. All of them cling to laughably primitive ideas from back when people had no clue why the sun rose or what lightning was. They could only see these things as miracles from the gods, and that's why today you still have people practicing these ridiculously primitive religions. And they're arguing for people to do away with science and scientific discoveries and keep believing the primitive nonsense of their forefathers. This is not something that you should be proud of, Russell.
For me, as a person who believes in God, my understanding of God is this, that my consciousness emanates from a perspective and it passes through endless filters, the filters of the senses, the subjective filters of the senses and of my own biography. This is good, this is bad, this is wrong, I want that, I don't want that. But behind all of that, there is an awakeness, an awareness that sees it all. And it's in you too, and it's in Stephen Fry, and it's in the man that was interviewing him. It's in all of us, an awakeness, an interconnectivity. None of us can ever know if there is a God, but we do know there is an us. None of us can ever know if there's wrong or right, but we do know there is an us.
So, wait a minute. I thought that Brand was claiming that Stephen Fry had proved that there was a God, and now he's saying that nobody can ever know that there's a God. We can only know that there's an us. We already know that, or at least that's what the evidence we have points to. There's a lot of stuff that Russell desperately wants to be true, but that he has no evidence for whatsoever that's still questionable. We know we're here, at least to the best of our ability to tell. When do we get to see the rest of it?
What do you think Jesus was then? I think he was a very good soul. He was an inspiration as a teacher. I do think a lot of the things he says are actually nonsense when you examine them. They seem very beautiful, but a bit like the Dalai Lama, they're actually twee and completely impractical. And in that sense, an insult to the human spirit. Like that him who is without sin cast the first stone. At first you think that's rather wonderful. Yes, what hypocrites. How can you possibly have a justice system? Nobody would ever go to prison.
Indeed, that's true. Jesus, if Jesus ever existed in the first place, said some really, really idiotic things. Take the Sermon on the Mount, where he told his believers to take no care for tomorrow, God will provide. Like hell, God will provide. So, if I just stopped working, stopped caring for myself, stopped finding food and shelter and clothing, all of that would be magically provided if I just believed in an imaginary man in the sky. How many people really believe that? I sure don't see Christians doing that, do you?
For me, Fry's conclusion that we should abandon God to be free, I believe the opposite, that we should embrace God to be free. Not embrace dogma, not embrace doctrine, but look, because within religion, even the most conventional religions, there's so many beautiful things. In fact, the thing Stephen Fry said there about that he who is without sin cast the first stone comes from a story in which Mary Magdalene, a prostitute, was being condemned, and Christ said, hold on a second, before we all start getting leery about Mary Magdalene, You lot are all perfect, are you? And now Fry says, how would you apply that principle judiciously in contemporary justice? Well, I would say that when you are condemning murderers or paedophiles, to acknowledge within us all is the capacity for evil. That as Solzhenitsyn, the Russian writer, said, the line between good and evil runs not between nations, religions, continents or creeds, but through every human heart. So when you are judging a paedophile, when you are judging the worst kind of criminals imaginable, to acknowledge that the thing in them that has manifest this negativity is also within us.
Russell, if the desire to kill people or screw children is within you, go away. Go far away. Far, far, far away so you can't hurt anyone. And now, that isn't what Jesus was saying, which is no surprise because you got the whole story wrong. So, the story comes from John 8:4-8. It has nothing whatsoever to do with Mary Magdalene. It deals with an unnamed prostitute that the scribes and the Pharisees brought to Jesus in an attempt to trap him. If he said to stone the woman, they'd get him for being violent and advocating murder. If he said not to, he'd be violating Mosaic law. Jesus instead did neither, telling them that only someone who is without sin should follow the law and stone her to death. So here, we see that not only does Brand have no clue what's actually in the Bible, he has no idea what the stories are supposed to be teaching. What an idiot.
Jill Bolte-Taylor, the neurologist that had a brain hemorrhage in the left side of her brain, experienced consciousness in a different way. When the conscious, nagging, left-sided mind that sees everything in materialistic and macho, rationalistic terms abated, limitless energy became available to her. She noticed that, in fact, her consciousness was a system of filtration, and when the left brain was quieted, she felt herself as part of a complete consciousness.
Funny how his hero here is someone with brain damage. Oh yes, free your mind. Have a corpus callostomy. It's funny that we've seen plenty of severe changes in brain-damaged patients. We've seen cases where, in a bilateral brain separation, the person developed two distinct personalities. One side believed in God, the other did not. We've seen people's personalities become totally reset. We've seen people's belief systems get turned on their heads. None of this had anything to do with there actually being a God. It had to do with brain chemistry and nothing more. This isn't expanding your mind. It's damaging the only tool we know we have for making sense of the world around us. And it's no wonder, considering what you've done to your mind, that you're so screwed up.
Now, no one can argue that, when a lion eats a gazelle, it can't be very nice for the gazelle. But what you can argue is that in infinite space, that doesn't matter. Then the tiny fragment of reality that we experience through our materialistic senses, our eyes that only see a limited range of light, our ears that only hear a limited range of vibration, the things that we experience here, we can't make any absolute conclusions from them. No one knows if there is a God or if there isn't a God. No one knows which interpretation is closest. We know that religion has long been used and continues to be used to justify the objectives of man, whether that's crazy terrorists in Paris or a great big Catholic church that was born of an alliance between an emperor and some radical rebel group.
So he's agreeing that organized religion is just a load of nonsense, predicated on political power and dedicated to social influence and monetary control. Well then, what is he on about? And when is he going to get to Stephen Fry proving that God exists? This isn't the first time he said that nobody can know if God exists or not. So now Stephen Fry has proven something that cannot be proven? Time to lay off the drugs, Russell. You're being utterly ridiculous.
When Constantine converted to Christianity, that's about materialism. That's about intellectual colonialism. And the thing that Fry condemns, I also condemn, because that is materialistic, humanistic dogma. That's not spirituality. That's not mysticism. That's not the acceptance that we are temporary, that our consciousness is connected to all consciousness. It doesn't matter where you come from, whether it's Freudian analysis or Darwinianism or the analysis of the cosmos. From the quantum to the cosmic, there is an unknown force behind things.
But you're just going off on a bender, making claims that you simply cannot back up. You have to prove all these things that you claim about spiritualism and shared consciousness and all the other woo-woo nonsense, and you haven't done any of it. Just because you desperately want it to be true, that doesn't make it so. Do try again.
What's your attitude to people who say, well, I'm not religious, but I'm very spiritual? I have to say, I get very worried by people using words like energy. Bad energy and good energy and positive energy and negative energy. All those things have no meaning to me, and I don't think they have any real meaning. But, if people want to grasp a crystal...
It's all absurd. We have no objective evidence that there's any such thing as the supernatural, that any form of spiritualism actually exists, that there are mystical, magical energies, that lying under a pyramid or wearing a crystal on your head or any of these other idiotic New Age nonsense actually does anything. It's all delusion. No wonder Russell Brand is all for it.
You can't judge all religion on the most stupid bits. That's like judging all football on the most stupid bits. I don't like football. Why is that? Well, when Eric Cantona kicked that bloke.
Cantona's getting involved with some supporters. Oh, this is outrageous.
Amma, the hugging saint, you look at her here, learn more about her here. Amma said, the question's not, is there a God? The question is there suffering? Yes, there is suffering, and what can we do about suffering? We can help one another, and we can love one another. Now, if you can do that through atheism, then do it through atheism. But a lot of people need to know that this is temporary, that we are the temporary manifestation of something greater, something complete and whole, something timeless and spaceless and absolute. And every dogma in the world has been trying to tackle and understand that. Art has been trying to represent it. Science has been trying to explain it. And no one can. We're up against the parameters. And I believe that without embracing something spiritual, something whole, something beyond human thought, we have no chance of saving ourselves and saving the planet. We are all connected to consciousness. We are all connected to one another. And to me, that sounds a little bit like God.
It sounds a lot like you've been smoking something funny. See, that's the thing. I don't get how people can, in effect, be giving themselves what amounts to brain damage and then act like it helps them to see things more clearly. No, you're screwing up the only organ that helps you actually make sense of how things actually are, you stupid git. You're not having a religious experience. You're having a self-imposed mental defect. And now we see Russell Brand reveal that he never thought Stephen Fry proved God because, according to Russell Brand, God is just something he imagined because the idea made him feel good. There is no God. There's only Brand's bizarre, drug-addled brain. He really needs to figure out what he's going to talk about. Is this about helping people, or is this about the supernatural? I can help people plenty without having to believe in an imaginary friend in the sky. Helping the helpless is far better than getting on your knees and praying about it or running around hugging people. The destitute cannot eat hugs. They cannot sleep under Bible verses, and they cannot wear prayers. All of that is totally worthless unless people get off their knees and get to work. Maybe when Brand comes down, he can try to get that simple fact through his suffering neurons. It probably won't work, though. Well, that's one down, dozens to go. So what did you think? Does anyone buy Russell Brand's particular brand of religious insanity? Go ahead and post your comments below and let us all know. While you're at it, like, subscribe, and share. Tell the world if you like what you've seen, and if you don't, tell me. If you have any other ideas or other videos that you'd like me to discuss, let me know. And remember, this is your brain, and this is your brain on religion. Take care.